So before I start this video off, I just want to make a disclaimer that you don't have to agree with me on every single point. But I do ask that you all take what I say seriously from someone who has played War Thunder for 8 years. So please, have a mature, constructive conversation, whether it's in the comments, on the forums, on a Discord, or wherever it is that you take to your War Thunder conversations with. This is my first video essay of sorts, so please bear with me if this comes across as a little amateur. There is no other game like War Thunder. You may compare it to other games of a free-to-play nature, but none truly captivate the same kind of audience. War Thunder has been advertised by Gaijin Entertainment as a combined arms World War II to present-day combat simulation game. However, it lacks the component that many other games of this nature have, that being infantry. Games such as Battlefield, Squad, and Postscriptum are focused on infantry supported by armored, indirect, or even airborne assets. War Thunder is strictly machine focused. I know Gaijin is working on Enlisted, but I have not played it and only watched a small amount of gameplay on it, so I won't delve into that too much. I think the main issue with War Thunder is that it has no direct competition, nothing comparable to it. You can compare certain aspects of games, but not the product as a whole. You could compare War Thunder tanks to Armored Kill of Battlefield 3, and Air RB and Arcade to a slightly slower pace, Air Superiority from Battlefield 4. Naval is just World of Warships with extra scroll wheeling, but no game is as realistically modeled and as accessible as War Thunder. And accessibility is what makes this game one of a kind. I don't think that I'm alone in saying that tank superiority from Battlefield 3 and air superiority from Battlefield 4 were probably one of the reasons that I actually did get so interested in War Thunder, is because I was looking for something like that, but with a little bit more historical relevance and realistic appeal. I don't really think I'm alone in saying that. But War Thunder, on the other hand, is without a doubt not a perfect game, and it will never be. However, games shouldn't be extremely broken or mismanaged like War Thunder has been a lot of the time from my point of view. So you all know where this one's going. War Thunder has had hundreds if not thousands of issues over the past 8 years. Most being pretty small, but they add up to make the game feel extremely unfinished. Most of the community by this point has deemed a few select issues to be the most important. As of Update 2.0, or as most of you know it by name, New Power, these are more apparent than ever. Problems like overall performance, where players get video driver hung for absolutely no reason, or the NVIDIA DLSS makes moving fast in an aircraft or a tank look like parts of the vehicle have Danny Phantom's little cartoon effect attached to them.
Didn't play it for a week. It got worse. Oh my god, I can't even quit matches now after being out. Holy fuck.
The servers, we all know the hamsters in the US have kicked the bucket, and now the packet loss is pretty much a daily occurrence. It makes the lag switching accusing 8-year-old from Modern Warfare 2 lobbies look like his dad actually does work for Microsoft. And don't even get me started on the physics. Instead of understanding how to make a map without ridiculous exploitive spots for top tier tanks, which are eating up the leftovers that is the cock and ball torture maps, Gaijin just decided to pretty much make all the tanks skate around like they're a Broadway musical called Leopards on Ice. The problem we have currently is that not everyone agrees on what issue to tackle first. Some people get better performance than others, better connection than others. Some don't even play the tanks that are practically useless on most maps after those terrain changes. I always see people bitching and dick measuring the issues they have compared to others, thinking that their view is the most correct one. I think it's time everyone put down their little personal wishes aside that distract from the larger issues that affects everyone. not just you. So let's drop the disagreements of the minutiae and get back to the biggest issues of War Thunder. Because, and no offense here, but some people that give feedback or recommendations on things have the IQ of a fly repeatedly slamming into a window. I know that may sound hypocritical to what I just said, but again, this is someone who has played War Thunder for little over 8 years at this point. Gaijin is currently running off of a formula that worked for years but is no longer feasible. That being release shiny new premiums that sell a gimmick or an overpowered vehicle. They make hundreds of thousands if not millions of dollars, which they have made off of some of the new power premiums individually alone, by the way. I'm looking at you, T72 terms. And from what I've gathered over my time of being a content creator, team resource needs to be reorganized to tackle issues in a certain order. In order, it needs to go from performance and server issues / upgrading servers, then to game-breaking bugs, then to battle ratings, and then finally to monetization. I know some at Gaijin may cringe at the idea that monetization is not the first thing on the list, but at some point, the money train's going to run out, and it's getting to that point. Even with the new Q&A announcement today, that showed that there might be sweep-wing aircraft coming, and overall, a lot of Q&A questions and answers were actually relatively positive, and there was really no excuse of queue times or statistics or this, that, and the other thing. It seemed like they were kind of turning it around, but at this point, a lot of people are so skeptical that it's really not buying them any sort of brownie points or good faith from those that they've pretty much already have felt like they've screwed over. The reason as to why I put the list in that order is because you can't have a multiplayer game if your servers are dead. You cannot solve game-breaking bugs if people aren't connecting and playing. If people can't do the first two, then you can't have an accurate as possible data on balance and battle ratings. And if all three persist, you can't have four, because at some point people are not going to advertise, play, buy into your game for a long period of time. Which again, it's starting to get to that point. This next part is entirely my inferences from my part as being an outsider to the inner workings at Gaijin. From what I've gathered of responses from community managers and other low-level Gaijin employees, is that teams are separated into different groups to work on different aspects of the game. While I understand that some do not have skill set for another part of the game's development, I do want to stress that it's not the developer's fault. To me, it's purely a management, staffing, and organizational issue. Everyone always says the devs don't play their own game, which in some part may be true, because their job is to make it, not to play it. I believe it was Smin who told me a while back that Gaijin does have their own internal playtesting team and strategy to work out the kinks of new updates. This just isn't feasible. Their content creators are some of the most experienced and well-versed players of the game in their respective game modes. Whether it be an expert jet player, prop player, World War II tanker, MBT tanker, or captain. Gaijin is missing the opportunity to have a few hundred player experts out there testing early builds for new updates, or running play tests of new battle rating proposals before they are announced to the public. It would save them a lot of hassle and PR bullshit to deal with from the random guy who's salty he gets bombed at his mouse and wants it lowered to 6.7. All the issues Gaijin are dealing with keep piling up because of their refusal to stop, pull back, analyze the entire situation, and then execute a different strategy. Look at it this way. If the developers are overworked, they then produce garbage or broken updates, vehicles, battle ratings, economy changes, etc., it will fall on the bug fixing team to fix stuff. But if they can't fix issues quicker than the developers pump out content, the cycle gets worse and worse. Top that with managers being told from their bosses to get shit done, without the problem managers may bring up being put into consideration. They then put pressure on their workers. If the bosses don't staff enough people to handle the workload, then it just trickles down the line and rebounds back up the chain, creating the same issue over and over and over again. War Thunder may have some of its highest player numbers ever, but it's been new shinies for years now and a good chunk of lasting invested players are leaving. Gaijin may pride themselves on their 1400 plus vehicles that are all highly detailed, but you can't carry your game on quantity alone. Ironically, it's that Russian mindset that we meme about from them winning World War II over, but it isn't working in War Thunder anymore. 100,000 players at prime time for EU and NA is great, but 80% of them are either in a match having connectivity issues, crashing their game and restarting, doing nothing in a custom battle, or just staring at their hangar, pondering all the money they've wasted getting absolutely no enjoyment from their PC burning right next to them from all the new graphics. Funny how Gaijin relies on their numbers so much, but it's basically lying to them half the time. So it reinforces the shitty decisions being made from management. I think a lot of real-world events that have transpired over the last year have done both good and bad for the game. COVID was a great, and I mean great, player and revenue booster for Gaijin. I guarantee when most people are able to return back to their normal lives, that the player numbers will drop by a shit ton. It's almost as if people are forcing themselves to play this game when they don't really want to anymore. They just have nothing else to do at this point. Not to get political, but events like lockdown protests and certain stonks events transpiring at the moment are subconsciously giving people the common sense to look at what they've been doing and realize that they are just conning themselves into wasting a lot more money and time than they should be. So if you are just playing War Thunder because you're bored, you should probably stop. Because aiding the system that's screwing you over isn't helping it get better. It's even been admitted that when they transfer builds from their internal testing to dev server and then to live server, that period of time is when a lot of issues you may have not seen on, say, the dev server all of a sudden arise out of nowhere when it goes to the live server build. Some of you may have experienced this with the A4E Skyhawk crashing your game anytime someone crashed into the ground on it, which was completely ruining people's days on the first days of new power. So the question is, why should we keep bothering with such an extremely flawed and broken system when the return that we're getting doesn't outweigh the cost of our sanity, of our money, and most importantly, our time? This section is such a terrible Halo meme, but I'm running with it anyways because it sounded cool in my head. Currently, content creators are starting to consider leaving or have left War Thunder, and or only make a small amount of content or flat out no War Thunder content at all. Personally, I thought War Thunder was going in the right direction and had some kinks to work out, but that seems to not be the case. Players are already shifting to different games of a similar genre to War Thunder. So much community infighting is probably driving this. Aircraft enthusiasts are going to games like IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad or DCS. Hell, even a few may go to World of Warplanes. Tankers are going to a few routes, whether it be back to World of Tanks and Armored Warfare for the more arcade approach, or Steel Beast and Gunner Heat PC for the more sim-centered community. Naval players, well, I don't know. Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, War on the Sea, Task Force Admiral, and Cold Waters are a few. World of Warships is a obvious no-brainer. It's up to you guys to play what you want. But just know this, there is no game like War Thunder currently. I fear there never will be again. You can't expect any alternative to replace what War Thunder is. So that dedicated base to War Thunder will always exist. It just won't be producing the kind of cash flow that is happening now. War Thunder will only ever get better if it has direct competition. Companies work to improve their products to one-up their competition. That's just how it works. Gaijin doesn't have to worry because Wargaming hasn't combined World of Tanks, World of Warships, and World of Warplanes all into one game. Gaijin has stated that War Thunder is a combined arms-focused game now. Who else can take up the job of taking on what War Thunder is? I don't know the answer to that. But there is one thing that is for certain. You may not know this, but War Thunder is actually built off of a game from 2009, perhaps earlier. IL-2 Birds of Prey is what an alpha state of War Thunder would look like. Its successor from 2012, Birds of Steel, is actually using the same graphical engine that War Thunder first used when the Mighty Jingles made videos on War Thunder, or even Rob Az's Canadian Policeman Bowfighter video. That decal, I believe, was even in Birds of Steel. So we have a game that has gone all the way to the modern era, and tanks on what is essentially an air simulator engine and big ships that nearly bricks your PC, on what is essentially a 2009 game engine. Yes, Dagor has been updated over the years, but it is still an outdated game engine for what Gaijin is trying to achieve. So yes, in my opinion, War Thunder needs to be rebuilt from the ground up with a better engine. Dagor has proved to be too unreliable and presents more issues than it solves. Broken physics, runs awful for a lot of people, and is just generally too unstable. The physics need to be corrected. Wheeled vehicles need to drive properly. Dump spots need to be just walled off with rocks or whatever Gaijin chooses. Tanks need to be tanks, not one-ton hockey pucks. Naval needs to have proper damage models, but the game is just overloaded. The coding is just fundamentally not prepared for the kind of ships that War Thunder has and will be adding in the near future. Now, I did mention Enlisted earlier, which Gaijin is also making on the Dagor engine. However, I think because that game has been freshly made and really hasn't gone through a lot of different Dagor engine versions, I think that it's actually a more stable game from the get-go. But War Thunder just hasn't had that ability. War Thunder has existed essentially for what has been over a decade. This section is definitely going to offend some of you, but it's the truth. Random raging, swearing, and death-wishing of Gaijin staff is completely out of line, immature, and counterproductive to good feedback. I've seen countless messages and posts from people who just cannot write a clean and concise response to anything that Gaijin does. You have no idea how much utter bullshit Gaijin staff have to sift through to find the good stuff. It's not helping the situation in any way at all. Gaijin employees are just simply tired of this. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if even Anton and Kirill are sick of the shit that they receive. Developers are fatigued and losing interest in War Thunder and want to move on. If it's not a positive relationship between consumer and producer, it never works, especially in the gaming industry. Gaijin has pretty much locked themselves into a cycle of countering player arguments with a spreadsheet of automated responses, whether it be statements such as, "It's to reduce queue times. According to our statistics. Thank you for your input. We did internal testing and it didn't work." You get the idea. By the way, internal controlled testing is pretty flawed when you don't have a decent sized player testing pool for anything other than bugs. Speaking of community, I have a few posts from some of my Discord users that I think a lot of you will agree with. Long story short, a lot of people think that Gaijin needs a better feedback filter and transparency with the data that they collect. Mainly the idea that content creators should be more intertwined with game balancing and feedback as well. Also, having a roadmap for each year would help people gauge when to expect content. And if something doesn't arrive on time, well, kindly ask, and if it's because they don't want to rush out a bugged mess, then tough shit. Some players just flat out don't engage with the majority of the community because it's either too toxic or too brain damaging to listen to. If you're asking yourself the question, will War Thunder die? Let me answer it for you. Yes, it will. It would be preferable that it was just a simple lack of interest after the game is, in quotes, complete, but that doesn't seem to be the case at the moment. Games like Armored Warfare were also brought to its knees because of development conflict between publisher and developer, albeit in this case, Gaijin is both. World of Tanks is too big to fail too quickly, to be honest with you, and I think War Thunder is at the point where it's in the same boat. Since wargaming and Gaijin pretty much dominate the World War II to Cold War MMO, vehicle combat, free-to-play genre type game, it's up to a smaller company to take on these games and pour their soul into it to either improve War Thunder or kill it. A solution to War Thunder's issues is easier said than done, and I am fully understanding of that. But we need to start somewhere. The player base needs to be more patient, constructive, and understanding. And Gaijin can only do so much, and while they do have some incompetence with how the company is ran, from the outside perspective of course, they do have a lot on their plate. 1,400 vehicles and an increasingly outdated game engine is quite the workload. But if they do not, and I repeat, do not, continue to deliver on community wishes and break the game even more, then it is on you, the consumer, to stop buying their premiums and other products they produce because you vote with your wallet. I know that is probably futile and people will continue to buy into the addiction, but it only ruins you and enriches them. Gaijin has a system in place that's making them millions by exploiting player frustration and hyper-excessive greed. It's only going to get worse if you keep allowing them to milk the cash cow. Personally, I think a lot of developers do deeply care for the project that has kept food on the table for years, but they have to be getting tired of this now and are caring less and less. In conclusion, and in my honest opinion, I think Gaijin can turn this game around. It just needs to sacrifice some revenue in order to do so. Will Gaijin do that? I honestly don't even think so. A shame such a game like this is turning into a pile of bugs and balancing issues. War Thunder needs to be remade in order for it to survive. Logistically speaking, with player progress, it would be a huge feat to transfer it all, and I understand that. But companies have pulled off miracles before. I just won't be holding my breath, because I'll end up dying faster than you can say most statistics.
Oh my god, how did I hit that? Germany suffered. Oh my. Hello, sweet cheeks. How are you doing?
He is dead.
Oh, got a crit on that guy. Got a missile on that guy.